items under... Sorry about that. We're back from recess. We're going to address the items under the public hearing. Public hearing A, the Industrial Development District for Minerals Technologies, formerly known as American Colloid Company. We did have public comment earlier. I guess just to offer it again, is there any public comment on public hearing item A for the public hearing for this? Yes, sir. Okay.
Brian Mull, 24772 J Drive South, Homer, Michigan. I'm not really up to speed on everything, but as I understand it, there's a fair amount of contamination, and I respect and second your concerns about how that's going to be handled, because we've been in several meetings with the land bank and understand that that whole area is contaminated. So I guess I haven't heard, and I think you addressed that issue, brought that up. I just want to express the same concerns of how they're going to handle the contamination that might be there and what's going to happen with that. So,
okay. Thank you. So any further comment on the public hearing under item A? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to close the public discussion. We're going to go back to council discussion. Do you want to present on it? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Krista Trout-Edwards. I'm the Executive Director of the Calhoun County Land Bank Authority. With me this evening is Annette Collier, who is the plant manager at the Albion facility, and Jim Dyer, who is the Land Bank's General Counsel. We had planned to have Joanne Coyne from the company here, but she was traveling in today, and as you can imagine, her flight was delayed multiple times, and the final delay was going to have her in Detroit after 6, so there was no way she was going to be able to make it here. So she apologizes. She really wanted to be here to discuss this with you, but it just didn't work out with the snowstorm. So I will do my best, and if you have any questions, we will do our best to answer them. This request tonight for the creation of this industrial development district is really about the retention of a long-standing local business and creating potential for future growth. American Colloid has operated on the site since the 1970s. The site was originally owned and operated on by Harvard Industries, as was much of that area out there that you all know. The foundry was in operation for over 100 years. The property, which is about 56 acres and some change, went through the tax foreclosure process in 2008 after a bankruptcy and a pretty nasty end of that corporation. It came to the land bank in that same year, and if it wasn't the first property that came into the land bank, it was one of the first, because we had just been created. The park that's there on the corner, as well as the former Harvard transportation site, were divided off previously, so they're not part of the request for this district. American Colloid has leased an 11-acre piece from the land bank since 2008. Over the years, we've had multiple conversations with them about potential purchasing of that property, long-term leases, etc. For over a year now, the conversation has been focused on whether the company should remain in Albion and where it's going to choose to locate an expansion and a new plant. The long and short of it is the plant here in Albion is at the end of its life, and they either need to invest money here or invest money somewhere else by consolidating. They decided ultimately to invest here in Albion. There were some other locations that maybe made more sense for short-term benefits, but the longer-term benefits is that this site is located in close proximity to many of the facility it services in Michigan, and so there was a transportation cost savings. The site also has a railroad spur that runs through it, and that's very important to the company. So that was another thing that they looked at. When they made their decision to stay here, they basically said, they wanted three things, or there were three contingencies. One was that they wanted the land bank to do a 30-year long-term lease on the 11-acre site. We had originally wanted to try and sell that property to them because we didn't want to own it long-term. But we also wanted to figure out a compromise to have them stay in the community, and that was one we felt we could live with because we knew that they were going to be investing in the plant, they are going to be upgrading it, and they are going to make it an asset to Albion. The other thing is they were looking for additional land, which is an adjacent 9-acre piece. The purchase price for that is $135,000. I heard some questions and comments about environmentals on that property. It was the company's responsibility to do all appropriate environmental inquiries before purchase. So how that works in Michigan is if you go out and you purchase a commercial property and you haven't done your due diligence, you are now liable for anything that happened there before you back to the creation of time. If you do your environmental and you get a baseline environmental assessment, which has to be done 45 days after purchase, you have liability protection. And that's what they've chosen to do, and they're comfortable with that. And so they did those reports, and we are set to close very soon on that 9 acres, after which they will do a baseline environmental assessment, and they will have liability protection. The other thing that they wanted to do was seek additional tax incentives, which is what they're doing here tonight with the creation of this district, and that's really a separate conversation between Albion and the company. So right now the project is the retention of the business, plus the existing employees, a capital investment on the existing leased area of $8.6 million. They're basically going to be saving the parts of that plant that are still usable and still have some life in them, and then rebuilding the parts that aren't. And they're going to be doing that on the leased property. The 9-acre piece would be held by them for future expansion, and that would go on the tax roll in 2019. So the first request is to create this industrial development district, and the second request is to do the tax abatement. Overall, I think this is a good project. It retains the company here in Albion. It's a partnership between the city, the land bank, and American Colloid. And as you know, this Harvard industry site has been very tricky. It's very large. It has some types of contaminants there. We don't have all the answers for that. We haven't done all of the environmental. It would be very costly. What we have done on the southeast side, so everything below that railroad, I've been working with DEQ since I came to the land bank in 2011. They spend money there. They consider it an orphan site. So they've identified quench oil plumes, which they have contained and or are going out to do some remediation next spring. So they're working on that site and getting this northern part, the part that's north and west of that railroad, back into productive use. I think it's a really great thing for this 55-acre site that has been, struggling since the foundry left. So I'll be happy to answer any questions. Annette is also here. I don't know, do you have anything you'd like to add now? Okay.
Are there any questions from council? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Ms. Trout-Edwards, I heard you say that there are some plans to consolidate as far as American Colloid. Like they have other. I'm trying to understand. Are they looking to bring other factories into the one that they're proposing here to make it bigger, more jobs, more? What exactly does that look like?
Well, I can only speak to what I know and not for the company. And when I said the word consolidate, when they originally were in this conversation with us, they were talking about closing the Albion plant, moving it to Archbold, Ohio, and consolidating their facility there. They chose to remain here in Albion as part of this request tonight. I don't know if you have anything to add to her, but that could answer her question any more.
If our customers do better business and the volume increases, there would be a possibility of adding another shift onto our plant. So that might be another possible 2 to 3 jobs. But it all depends on the foundry industry for our customers.
So the plant in Ohio is going to remain in Ohio?
Yes.
What I'm hearing.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any questions? Okay. Oh, okay. Yes.
I just want to say what has happened on this particular property is that Ms. Duprez and Krista worked really hard with American Colite to bring this project into fruition. What has happened is that there are some questionable environmentals, and as Ms. Trout said, that they're going to try to address them through their agreements that they have now the best way they possibly can. For us, my questions when we first had conversations in regards to this project were, how many of these individuals were Albion residents? So if we were keeping jobs in town, I wanted to make sure that individuals locally were remaining employed. I don't know how many individuals there live in Albion. I do know, I think they said it's 11 jobs that this particular plant would keep. There's also approximately a $9 million investment, which is a good thing for us. We do want to keep our jobs in town. We do want to keep trying to be as business friendly as we possibly can to retain as many business as we possibly can in town. So after some long, hard discussions with our staff, I would recommend approval for this particular project. But I do think we, meaning the city, American Colloid, the land bank, need to talk about how we're going to ensure that any contamination, if any, is definitely contained once everything takes place when the new building is built.
I can speak to that.
Okay.
The baseline environmental assessment identifies what's going on the site, and then the company would be required to do any due diligence that comes out of that. So if there is something there and they're going to be building on that site, they are required to proceed with the due diligence care plan, which means they can't exacerbate it. They can't take it off the property and put it on somebody else's property. That's standard practice, really, in Michigan. And it doesn't, I mean, the land is there, and it's a tricky piece of property. We have a company who understands the environmental, who is an industrial company, so they get what that takes. They've done their due diligence, and they think that it makes sense for them to purchase and have this land for expansion. So they understand that. We spent many hours talking about environmental, and we could leave that property there forever and never do anything with it, and that's not a great way to approach it either. So this is a piece, this is a piece of this larger site that we spent a lot of time looking, and they've spent, the buyer spent a lot of time making sure that it makes sense for their company, and they feel comfortable with it, and their attorneys feel comfortable with it, if that gives you any peace of mind.
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. So the land that they're currently on, they own that land?
The land that they're currently on is leased.
Okay, because I know they're going to be asking for this tax abatement, and I heard you say something would be off the tax rolls in 2019.
The 9-acre piece will be back on the tax roll in 2019. Yep. So the issue with the lease parcel is that it was at one time operated by Harvard Industries, and now it's operated by American Colloid. And if you went all the way back, it would be, and there was contamination, it would be very difficult to figure it out. And so one of the things that they asked us to do, one of the compromises they asked us for, was a long-term lease, which took care of some of our concerns, which would be owning the property and having them leave tomorrow. It showed me and showed my board and our team that they were committed to Albion, and so we felt like that was a good compromise, and that made sense.
So one question, and I just want to say so we're all clear about it. So there's a piece of land that they're on right now that they're leasing from the land bank, and the intent is to lease that long term going forward. But then also when they begin to establish the new facility, that is going to be on.
It's going to be on they're going to rebuild the existing plant. Right?
Okay.
Awesome. So it's going to be on the leased property.
Okay.
If they decide to expand their operations, it would be on the 9-acre piece. So in your packets, Joanne Coyne from American Colloid did provide a map.
Yeah.
And I think it would just be easier if you had a visual. So if I may approach.
They have it.
Yeah.
I gave it to them, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So this solid square is the existing plant, and that's that leased area. This 9 acres adjacent to the west is what they'd be purchasing, and that would be on the tax roll.
So then I guess the question with, and I know it's something that we have to do with the establishment of that industrial district, would that in any way interfere with your ability to, I'm saying, can you take a position on that, or are you just neutral on that?
For the tax abatement,
Yes.
I think it's good to keep the company here, but it's a conversation between the
Okay.
two parties.
Okay. You had a question? Councilman Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm just
Oh,
gonna
I'm
ask,
sorry.
monetarily, what's the benefit to the city? I'm asking.
Sure. So right now, the 29 or the 11-acre piece isn't on the tax roll. They're paying personal taxes. They pay income taxes. So they're paying all of those to the community already, and the personal property taxes is pretty significant. So if they leave, clearly that money isn't coming in to the city. And if we have another vacant industrial piece of property in the city, that would be bad too. Just, from ability to actually maintain and address those properties. So the benefit is to retain this business here and have them have additional land for expansion.
Okay. Councilmember Spicer?
Right, and the taxes on the land that they're purchasing.
Okay. Councilmember Spicer?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, the 9 acres is not currently on the tax roll, would go on the tax roll in 2019, would be collected.
Okay. Councilmember Spicer?
So thank you, Ms. Mary. So they understand that there is some contamination there, and that has not frightened them away.
Correct.
They're committed no matter what the environmental study.
Well, they've already done it.
Okay, and it doesn't. Okay.
Yeah. It was part of the purchase agreement was for them to do it.
And they're
Yes.
They're there. Okay, so any idea? So will the facility that they're going to be building, will it mimic what they currently have, or is there some type of? I mean, are we going to have something that looks good, or something like that, or do we have any idea what they're going to put there? I know that they have other companies. Am I correct in Ohio? And I was just wondering. I think I've seen them, and I think that they have a nice facility in Ohio or Indiana, wherever it is. So I was wondering
Yeah,
what.
I mean, I can't say exactly.
Facility here.
Yeah, I can't say exactly what they're building, but they did provide this map that shows a location plan. And, it is an $8.6 million investment. And, the plant that's there right now is at the end of its life, so it would look very different. I don't know if you have anything more specific on what the new plant will look like.
No, if I thought about that, I would have brought a picture of it, but it will be tearing down the old tanks that are up now. It'll be a new structure with tanks on top for our inbound material, new outbound tanks for our finished product going out the door. They plan on redoing the outside of our unloading station for unloading the rail cars, and are redoing the warehouse outside shell of it also.
Okay.
But the office will stay as it is, and the maintenance building will stay as it is.
I know that 8.6 million is a tremendous amount of money in my book. However, I went online and I saw the facility I think we have in Ohio, and it just looks fantastic. So I was just wondering.
Yeah, it won't look like that one exactly. We have one out in Shell Rock, Iowa, that they're taking off of. They just built that 4 years ago.
In Iowa?
In town of Shell Rock, Iowa.
City Manager?
I just want to say that just for this council's, just to relieve any of that, what it looks like, once prior to the issuance of the permits, I will ensure you that I will provide everyone with a rendering of the property so that you will see what the actual building looks like, if that would be sufficient for all of the council persons.
So the one thing I'd say is conversations with council members and the manager. I think that one of the things the city is going to have to do going forward. I want to say the EDC does have like a project worksheet for certain kinds of economic development, but maybe there needs to be in line with the manager is actually trying to do with a lot of the strategic planning that's happening from the different boards. Maybe there needs to be a kind of a coordinated document to make sure that we understand sort of what Mr. Smith said earlier. What's the impact environmentally? What's the impact for residents in terms of jobs and income to the city? So I think that's something because that's really what I hear is a concern about making sure that when these projects come before us, that we have a clear understanding of the benefit to residents and then to the community. So with that being said, we're going to, I see no further discussion. We're going to have a roll call vote on this, and then we'll just kind of do the same thing for the rest of these. So, okay, roll call vote, please.
On 25.
On, huh? Yes, thank you.
I have a motion.
Oh, you got a question? Okay, go ahead. Just 1 second.
We're only looking at the 9 acres as far as, the industrial development district. Is that correct? Or are we looking bigger than that?
It's for the former Harvard site that's still in land bank ownership. So it's my understanding it's the 9 acres, the 11 acres, plus the remaining like 34 acres. But you're not granting an abatement on all of that. It's just the American colloid piece. Yep. So the tax district is for that whole piece as an incentive, you know, to hopefully encourage future development there. And then the abatement is just for the American colloid piece.
Thank you.
Oh, Councilman Spicer.
Thank you for Krista. Krista, with the development with American Colloid on that property, would you say that would not be possible for any future housing development on that same land?
No housing out there, not with the history.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, I ask for a motion. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just as a point of clarification,
Okay.
you're doing a public hearing on this part. The motion would be for one of the 2 resolutions that you have.
Okay.
But
Okay.
what I would recommend is doing the resolution to approve the district
Okay.
and then doing the public hearing on the exemptions.
Okay, we'll do that. Okay, we'll do that. So is there a motion to approve the resolution? Councilmember French.
I move that we approve Resolution 2018-25 to establish an industrial development district for Minerals Technology, Inc., and the Harvard site.
Is there a second? Okay, moved and seconded. We've had discussion. Is there any further discussion from council? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote for the approval of the resolution.
Councilmember Reed?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Spicer?
Yes.
French?
Yes.
And Mayor Brown.
Yes. Okay, we're to the public hearing, item B. I'm going to open that for public comment. And this is for the exemption certificate for a new facility for Minerals Technologies, Inc. So I'm going to open that for a public hearing. Is there any discussion on that from the public? 3 minutes. We ask for proper decorum. Is there any discussion on that? Okay. Oh, please state your name and address as well.
I live at 310 East Michigan Avenue. May I see the map where that industrial park is going to go? Well, it's just... Because, I mean, that seems like when you say industrial community. Well, this is before our Harvard. So this is Austin Avenue.
Oh, so,
We're taking it to
yeah, so, one second. Yeah.
So you guys are upgrading.
Okay, 1 second. Yeah, this is for,
No, I'm curious as to where it is because I can't really say what I want to say if I don't know where it is.
okay.
What I'm concerned about is the fact that we're talking about our water, and then I'm concerned about the fact that who is even testing the ground that's currently contaminated at the dog park that was supposed to be tested at intervals. And since they're not going to be liable for the original pollution, and then how is it going to work when they whatever they're cleaning up when they're done in 30 years? I'm really more worried about the impact it's going to have on the health of our residents than anything. I mean, you can smell the what is it called, the insulation factory. I mean, it's like, you know what I mean? This is going to be like, we have neighborhoods all around this area. I mean, it's just, I wonder how 11 to 13, 14 jobs compared to our quality of life. There has to be some sort of balance. That's what I'm concerned about.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment on the hearing for the exemption? Okay. Seeing none, I'll close that. Okay. Discussion from council. So, would you like to touch that? I mean, is there?
I don't know that I'm prepared.
Oh, okay, okay.
Because it's the company's request. I mean, I believe that they have an agreement with you that they applied.
You wanna? Okay. The city manager.
What they are currently asking for is a 12-year, 50% tax abatement for this particular property. And just like most of the residents here that had questions, I did have questions in regards to the tax abatement, but they couldn't get the tax abatement if you didn't approve the district. And so that's sort of the whole reason of requesting the district be approved so that they can receive the tax abatement. It's important, and I'll say this again, it's important that we as a city understand also that we have to do what we can do to retain businesses in town the best way we possibly can. Tax abatements aren't things that aren't incentives that have not been done before. They're utilized all over the country to ensure that businesses continue to reinvest and stay in town. So I would urge the council to approve the tax abatement.
So, so the question was the environmental thing. Can we provide any? Because I know you can't speak for them, but
Yeah, I can't speak for them, but the one thing I would add about the environmental is that it's much more stable with an operating company out there and a landowner out there, because they are going to be required to follow their due diligence plan. So that, that's a bonus, I think.
okay. Is there any further discussion from council? Councilman Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. So I don't really have a question because who I need to ask isn't here. But I do have concerns about the contamination. What I'm hearing you say is that, pretty much, to sum it up, once you know about it, they have to do something about it, correct?
No. What Michigan law requires is for anybody who purchases property to do all appropriate inquiries. You do a phase 1, there's nothing there, you stop, you're good to go. You do a phase 2, there's a recognized environmental contaminant, you probably need to do some additional testing to find out what that is. That pushes you over into the requirement for a baseline environmental assessment. And that happens after you buy the property. You have 45 days to do a baseline environmental assessment. DEQ, Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, does not require new buyers of property to go out and do any cleanup unless it's some special circumstance. I have not heard of one, and I have not run across that yet in my career. I'm sorry, I have a cold. With a baseline environmental assessment comes a due care component, and that due care component is what they would be responsible for, so they cannot exacerbate. They cannot move, that contamination off and make it worse for somebody nearby. So that's the liability and the protection that Michigan's law gives folks who purchase, commercial and industrial properties.
Okay. So I guess just if they're there, they can't make it worse. But is there any requirement just for periodic to make sure it hasn't become worse?
Yeah, that would be part of a due care.
Okay.
So if you, in some other projects that I'm working on, there might be a vapor issue. Soil vapors are very hot right now. There's new technology. The DEQ is watching them. So you might have to periodically test. They call it seasonal testing to check that to see if it has changed. So it depends what's there. It depends, what you're doing to the property. If you're just holding vacant land, you're not disturbing it. So, you've got that. If you're building on it, that changes it. When we do demolitions and we know that there's some contaminations, we do a due care plan, and the demo companies have to abide by that plan. We spend the money, we get that done. So it really depends on each circumstance, but broadly, that's how Michigan law works.
Okay, is there any other questions from council? Okay, so what we're going to do is let's ask for a motion to approve the resolution 2018-26, and this is to approve the application for the tax exemption. Councilmember French?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilmember Brown,
Well, is it? Go ahead.
It's, related to,
Oh, okay.
about to vote on.
Okay, go ahead.
It's okay. When I thought I had the original understanding, if you know, I felt better. Like I'm not. I'm worried about the contamination piece of it. I'll be honest with you. And if you can.
The best thing that I can tell you is this: if you are not going to alter the situation, the environmental situation on that property by denying an industrial tax exemption. That won't. So you're not going to improve the situation by denying that. What you're going to end up with is you'll have an owner, a stable owner that's committed to. How long is the lease? 30 is committed to pay a 30-year lease to the land bank to keep that property, and they're going to build a substantial new structure to do that work, a significant investment. They'll be required and monitored by the Department of Environmental Quality to maintain that baseline, what's there now, to not make it any worse. But the point that I think you need to understand is if you don't grant this and they decide not to build that plant, what you'll have is what you have now on the balance of the Harvard Industry site is property that's owned by the land bank that will definitely not get any better and may not be monitored by anybody that will be responsible for the contamination that may be there. And once they know what is there, they'll be required to do what is necessary to have that situation not get any worse. A good example is, for example, let's say they found arsenic on the property. That's a common contaminant, not necessarily for a foundry supplier, but it's a common contaminant. The due diligence might require them to put 6 inches of topsoil and seed the area of contamination that's not going to be under concrete. That might be what the due diligence plan is. So they'll be required to do those things. And again, if you don't approve this, you're not going to have potentially not going to have an operating entity that will be responsible for doing those things and monitoring them on a daily basis. So you're better off with somebody operating the property than not operating the property for that reason. It's the best I can tell you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any further questions or discussion? Okay. We'll do a roll call vote. Thank you.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Spicer,
Yes.
French,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
and Mayor Brown.
Yes, we've approved Resolution 2018-26 to approve the application for a tax exemption under the established industrial development district. Okay, we're going to go back now to item H on the agenda, which is discussion of the 2019 general fund budget. Yeah. Okay. Director Mead.
Good evening. Tom Mead, Finance Director.
Thank you, Jim.
So, what's going on with the general fund this year? Lots of things, sorta, kinda, but in a sense, not so much maybe. I think the way I'm going to suggest approaching this tonight is going to be a little bit different. We're doing some different things with the general fund this year, and I think the best way to get a good understanding of that is if we can kind of go back and look at the city budget as a whole, look at the big picture and how the city operates. And general fund, of course, is the kind of the heart of the city. You know, it's the biggest fund. There's 20 different departments within the general fund. A lot goes on there. And the problem that we have, in addition with the general fund, we also have 28 other funds in the city. And a while back, Mayor Brown and myself and Ms. Rufus was in the Ms. Rufus's office discussing this, and I think Mayor Brown had a really good analogy of this. He said, you know, if we were a big city, lots of resources, you know, I'm thinking like Board of Water and Light or something with their, you know, whole division that does just their water and electric utilities. Every fund could probably have its own payroll, its own, you know, directors that serve almost in the capacity of a city manager, its own HR, its own, you know, all these individual departments that are within the general fund could almost reside in each of these 28 different funds within the city. We're not that big a city. We're a smaller city, obviously, and it doesn't really make sense to have all those positions in each of those funds. So what we do at the City of Albion is a very common practice that's done with a lot of other cities. We have a lot of services here in the general fund that, or departments rather, that provide services to all these funds. And all these, so for example, payroll, you know, it's in the general fund, it's in the finance department, but it's doing payroll for all the people, for all the funds. HR, same way, even city manager, you know, even council. I mean, you guys are making decisions for all these funds. So is it fair for the general fund to bear the 100% of the cost for all these services, you know, positions for all the providing all these services, when you have 20 some other funds using those services? And I think the answer is no, absolutely not. I mean, we should not be providing all those services to these other funds free of charge. So what the city has done historically, and this has created some confusion and made it difficult, I think, to follow the flow of stuff through our budget. We have tried, for whatever reason, I mean, this goes back a number of years, we have tried to take a lot of the administrative positions, city managers, you know, some of the different key positions in the general fund, and have other funds pay a portion of their salary. And the problem with that too, it gets a little more complicated because our payroll system is set up so that benefits follow the salary. So if you take 10%, for example, of a city manager's salary and say, okay, we're going to charge that to the sewer water fund, they're going to pay it, then 10% of all those benefits also follow. So you not only have that one line item that's being spread all over the city, you have multiple. You have all the benefits, all the, you know, taxes and all the other stuff, like Medicare, it's all being spread all over the city. So when someone looks at the city manager's budget, for example, and I keep picking on that position, but it is a department that, again, oversees the entire city, they would see a very, very small portion of the expense would be a very small portion of the city manager's total costs, total salary and benefits. And if you wanted to see if somebody said, okay, what's their total salary, you would have to go to a lot of different funds and add up that portion of her salary. And the problem is it would be mixed in, of course, with salaries of people that are already in those positions. So the other approach, and this is a very common approach as well by other cities, is let's charge all the salaries, all the costs to the department that they should go to. Let's charge 100% of the city manager's salary to the city manager. Same with people in my department. People that are doing payroll, people that are doing AP for everybody in the city. Let's charge 100% of it to the finance department, 100% of city managers to the city managers. But what we can do is we can come up with some form of allocation to spread the cost to basically charge the other funds admin fees, because we are doing work for you. It's no different than if they went out and hired a payroll firm or whatever to try and do payroll for them. And in a sense they have, because they've hired, in a sense, the general fund to do it. You kind of have to look at these 28 funds in the city as 28 separate businesses in a sense. We can't commingle the funds, and we can't take sewer and water payments and reseed them in the general fund. We can't take street millage money and reseed that in the general fund. The money has to stay in each fund that it's designated for. And so again, they're treated kind of as separate businesses for the most part. So what we've done this year is we've decided, as I've said, we're going to put 100% of the costs into the department that it makes the most sense for it to go to. And that's why back, I can't remember the exact date, but a couple weeks ago, you had in your packet a general fund proposal that showed it's about 430,000 short, or 450,000 short, if I recall. That was showing you what it is like, what the true cost is for the general fund for paying 100% of the salaries for all the people that work in general fund. What it did not show at that point was us coming up with administrative fees to charge these other funds. They in turn then would pay us basically a revenue coming into the general fund for us providing that service to all those other funds. So does that make sense so far? Okay, cool.
And
Cool.
and it should make it easier, because we'll be able to see just that infusion from that fund into general fund versus tracing down all the other
And
salaries.
I might add to this, when we had this discussion, I put it out on the the Michigan Municipal Treasurers listserv, and just proposed that question: how are other cities doing this? And so far, I had received actually, what did I get? Allendale Township, City of Springfield, City of St. Joe, City of North Muskegon, City of Marshall, City of Montague, City of Manton, and City of Dexter so far have all responded. It's interesting in how they're doing it. The big challenge in doing this, and what I would recommend going forward, I mean, this is a start. This is a step that we are taking to try to make the stuff look cleaner. What I'm going to suggest at some point we might want to consider, there are actually consulting firms that do cost allocation studies, and they will actually come in and evaluate all the services you're providing to other cities, what the cost of that service is, and they'll come up with fees as to what should be charged. The goal of that primarily is, if you're ever questioned by, well, why are you charging this fund that amount, you've got something documented. I will tell you, all these cities that I mentioned that responded, they all provide, well, not every single one provided me their worksheets or spreadsheets. Most of them did. There's a variety of ways they're doing it. Not all are real, similar, but most are pretty similar. Most of them said we look at all our indirect costs from all our administrative positions and salaries or departments, and we spread it based on some type of allocation throughout the city and throughout all these other funds. Their methods were a little different, but the concept is the same. that's probably the next step, is we could work towards coming up with some good factual numbers to determine how to spread these. But like I said, I think we got to start somewhere. And given the fact that we started thinking about this just a matter of weeks ago, we made a lot of progress in a short period of time. So it's a good start. And one thing I will point out in here was kind of interesting. The city of Manton, even though a very small community, their comment was they charge administrative services to the other funds based on an amount determined by their auditors. I found that interesting because it just proves that even their auditor, I mean, this is a common approach. This is an acceptable approach. This is something that governmental accounting financial standards does allow. And even their auditors are, probably because they are a smaller community, their auditors are helping them determine, how much they want to spread. And I'll take it one step further. Several years ago, before I came here, I did work for a consulting firm that does that type of work. Briefly, I wasn't there real long. It's a very interesting concept when they do it, because it's not just a situation of looking at, for example, the cost of payroll. You'd say, okay, what do we pay how many people work in our payroll department? What do we pay them? What's the benefits? They take it way beyond that, because they say that the people in payroll are also utilizing services provided by other departments. So there's costs on top of costs. So to get the true picture of what your costs are, they have some pretty sophisticated software that they can come up with allocations or suggested charges, I guess, to other funds. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at.
So even though each of the other communities, there's a different maybe style or approach, the overall, I guess it's more similar in that they're charging some kind of administrative fee versus breaking
Absolutely.
Positions across the fund.
100% of the ones that responded are doing that. They're charging a fee for a cost that they come up with, that they have determined through, like I said, some have really elaborate spreadsheets, some had some pretty simplified spreadsheets, but they have all come up with costs that they feel was a simplified basic cost for providing the service. And they look at all the funds that utilize that service and try to come up with a percentage of time that each fund is using that service, and then they spread the cost or charge a fee accordingly. So that's what we did with the general fund. So it's going to be a little different this year in a few areas. Questions on that so far? Does it make sense? With that in mind, I think I'll go through this rather quickly, because honestly, most of the expenditures, most of the revenues have not changed in principle or in, there hasn't been anything dramatic, I guess, in the general fund. I'll point out just a few. But other than that, it really, like I said, it's just a little bit of a difference on where the salaries and wages are charged. They're all being charged in the general fund now for the positions that are employed by the general fund, and then the revenue coming in for charging those are up accordingly. So, having said that, the first page, I think I printed this off the packet, so I think your page numbers will be the same. It's 1 of 28.
Yes.
This first page is revenues. These are general revenues that come into the general fund. Again, a little bit of increase in taxes. We'd like to see more, but again, with Proposal A, we're capped. No matter how much our real estate values go up, we're capped. We can only go up maximum rate of inflation, or roughly 2% a year, with the exception of anything new, any new construction that can come on the books for whatever the taxable value is. But again, we're seeing for the first time since 2008 an actual, turn in our taxable value. So we're expecting a little bit of an increase next year. Income taxes, again, we're hoping to see some increase. We're getting more aggressive on trying to collect several delinquencies that are out there. Also, we're trying to find a lot of the non-filers and going after them. So we are hoping to see some of those.
Can you clarify very briefly, because I know we have a lot to go through, but what the technology that innovative software uses to do, there have been some questions about the accuracy of tracking whether someone has filed. Can you explain how they determine whether someone has filed else with the state or federal and not filed with us? Can you explain that?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, let me back up. Innovative software, just so people understand, even though the name implies software, it sounds like a software company. Yes, they did invent, or if that's the word, develop, I guess, from a techie term. They did develop the software for income tax collections, for local income tax. There are not a lot of cities, 23, that have local income tax, so it's not a real lucrative business for a lot of the software companies to get into. When you look at something like property taxes, every city, every community, every township, everybody has property tax. Very few in the state have income tax. So there aren't a lot of income tax software companies out there. We're fortunate this one's in Eaton Rapids. They're close. They give us great support, and they do Michigan, Ohio. They're getting into a couple other states now. But anyway, developing the software was the first part, I guess, of their business. They've done a lot of growth. They are now doing a lot of collections for other cities, particularly when the state has to step in under the emergency manager situation for these larger communities. The state is contracting, or was for the most part, contracting with this particular company. The state did decide to create a new department a few years ago, so they are doing some of that themselves now, like for the city of Detroit. Up until then, Innovative Software did it for Detroit, did it for Flint, they did it for several of the they're big communities, but the suburbs around Detroit, when Benton Harbor, all these different places where the state has gone in. And they also are doing it just for people that, communities that just want the help, the expertise. Because what they're able to do, because they work so much with the state, they'll take their database and they can get databases from the state, and they will ask for certain criteria. They'll say they want everybody that has an Albion return, for example. So everybody that filed an Albion, everybody who filed a state of Michigan tax return and resides in Albion, and they can map it out, because obviously the Albion zip code goes beyond the city, but they can map it out on their software and identify by address whether it's an Albion resident or outside the city. And they can compare those, and if you think about it, if you had income that you file at the state, you should also be filing an Albion return. So that's kind of how that's what their technology is doing for us and helping us try to find a lot of the non-filers.
Okay, so they basically help us figure out when someone has paid the state income tax, has declared Albion as their residence, but there's no record of them having paid us.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I just wanted.
Yep. Absolutely. Local community stabilization, that amount is still there. I think I've explained it before. It bounces around. The state told us a long time ago to put it on 573. Then they decided no, to put it on 441, and now they're back to saying, well, we probably were right the first time. It should go down on 573. So it looks funny in our on the line items here, but the bottom line is it's been there every year since personal property tax reform. The disheartening thing this year when we received our check, I don't know why, but it was considerably lower than what we expected. For example, in 17, general fund received $118,000 for personal property tax reimbursement from the state. This year we got just under $74,000, so we had like almost $50,000 drop. And a lot of municipalities around the state have been complaining that this formula is very complex and people can't understand it, can't follow it. And the state is addressing that, trying to make it a simpler formula, a simpler process. And I'm not sure, I heard something about them even setting up an appeals process. And I think it would be worth us to look into that. We may want to appeal that number because that is a drastic drop I mean, when you think about it, the personal property tax reform was set up so that each year a little bit more of your personal property tax drops off your roll. So theoretically, your reimbursement should be going up, and it was until 18. Question.
Councilmember French.
I look at what you budgeted for 2018. It was only 85,000. So maybe you had some idea that 2017 was lucky. So I thank you that it's only a loss of 12,000, not 30,000.
I'll be honest, because I've heard so many communities, so many treasurers around the state talk about that nightmare of having these numbers bounce all around. We last year were just exceptionally conservative. Yeah. Only because things bounced around so much. And honestly, too, I will say, too, those numbers, those reimbursements don't come generally until November. In fact, we just got ours like in November. So if you look back at 16, my guess is, I can't remember the date we actually worked on the general fund budget, but in 16, we would have looked and said, okay, we got 78.5. We probably hadn't received 17s yet. We went with 85, not knowing. So maybe it's luck. I don't know.
It's a lot easier to find.
That still hurts a lot. When you see 118, that drops to 74. So,
Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. So did I hear you say that there are plans to appeal this? Or did you suggest that we?
I need to look at when that process, I don't recall if they set the appeal process up for payments received in 18 or if that's something that will go forward starting with payments in 19. I plan on looking into that.
So, and I do have one other question. So the 122 for next year, what makes you feel it's going to be?
Kind of like everything else, we're hoping. We got our fingers crossed.
Okay.
I'll say this: EDC, well, not EDC, Tifa had the opposite happen. When ours was much higher than we expected last year, Tifa's was a huge drop, and we couldn't figure out why. This year, ours is a big drop. Tifa's is way higher than we expected. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe it evens out. Again,
Every odd year.
I mean, literally, it's as crazy as it sounds. I've sat in meetings where the speakers from MML have talked about going into the Treasury office and saying, walk us through one of these calculations. And they can't do it. It's so complex. And they're saying, you got to change this. Nobody can understand it. Nobody knows, how much to budget. I mean, these numbers are all over the board. So even the experts, the people that really understand, people smarter than me, are not getting it. So. And I did want to point out too, it's about halfway down line 101-000-488 medical marijuana license. I did want to point out we did receive the $70,000 this year. We hope it continues next year. I don't know with the new law now how if the state's going to step in. Maybe their attorney knows more on that. I don't know.
My understanding is licensing regulatory affairs is going to put in another set of emergency rules for this new set of facilities. I'm willing to bet that it's going to be similar to the existing rules with a twist, but when they're going to do that, I don't know.
So that would have to be a whole nother set of ordinances.
Yep.
So, again, we're just going with what we got with the applicants that we got this year, assuming they will all have to reapply next year. That was the assumption we went with, so.
Okay.
Other than that, there's not a lot of changes until you get just a little further down, 2 or 3/4 of the way down, 101-000-62610. This is where we set up this charges for services for admin fees. We'll point out, we've always charged some fees for supplies, for mail, for doing a lot of the things that we do for some of the other funds, but it has never included the salaries for the key people, like the city manager and some of those that we talked about, where in the past, those salaries were spread.
I have one question, I'm sure.
Yep.
I'm trying. So I just have one question about that. Because we have to do the line items and it helps for accountability purposes,
Right.
Is there any difference between having just one item for all, or, because I'm assuming that's all the funds together, correct?
Correct.
Is it just, would it be permissible, would it be burdensome if we had a line item for where it was coming out of the different funds?
No, we could show that if you felt that would be helpful. We could show that on the general fund. Obviously, when you look at the expenditure side in the other funds, you'll see that amount going out. But you're correct, right now it's all coming into one line item. And as you'll see, it jumped from like 204,000 that we budgeted last year up to 467. It's more than double, and that's because we're taking into account all these salaries. So
I was just saying that just for kind of documentary purposes, so like in the future, we can kind of see like, we took this much out of.
absolutely.
So just a thought. But
Okay.
sorry about that.
No, that's good. That works well. Other than that, not a lot of changes. Other than I will quote down a little bit. 101-000-673 near the bottom. We had an interesting thing happen this year with the, at least in my mind, it was a little interesting. The sale of the incubator building. It was kind of interesting to me because all these years, the incubator fund administered it, so to speak, got the tenants, paid the utilities, paid the sidewalk assessments and all those things over the years. But my understanding is we get ready to sell it and we realize, oh gosh, the city of Albion actually owns that. So we did get a large chunk of the sale proceeds from that. That's something that will not be obviously ongoing, but it did come in this year. Now, it is a little bit less than what the sale amount was because if you recall, there was a roof repair done on that building and it was...
Cemetery Trust.
Yep, the Cemetery Trust loaned them the money. We decided it would be a good time to just pay that off and be done with that loan between the cemetery and what was EDC. If the building's gone, the general fund probably would have had to assume the debt, and we just decided let's just pay it off with the sale proceeds. The balance of them came into general fund, so that did help. Flipping over to the next page, you can see total revenues. We're looking at $3,948,592. Again, a lot of the increase is because of the new administrative fee revenue coming in from other funds. I'll move on. I think most of these now I can go fairly quick. The next page, City Council, there's no big change there. We did make sure we had enough in there, or should be enough in there to cover the Attorney Smith's charges, if I recall. I think we're up to $87.50. That should cover all of his if I... Yep.
Councilor French.
So why are we putting $7,500 into contract professional services for 2019, since we're not planning on hiring Attorney Smith for the coming year? And previous years, it's been 1,500 or 500 and 6,000. You know,
I'll be totally honest with you. Most of these departments, we send out to the department heads to give us what they think they're going to do. Some of these fall into that category where, at the time we're doing them, we're not certain what's going to happen next year.
So
What
it's a
the
placeholder
council.
value.
Yep, and we could lower that if you. And again, this is your opportunity to.
Yeah,
New council can do that.
I will say that as part of the code of ethics, the next sitting of the council is going to have to, within 60 days, have a training. So someone's going to have to pay for that, whether it's MML or another facilitator. And then also, I know in 2017, I don't think we did it in 18, we had a training for all board and commission members. And so that's something that I'd recommend that, provision be made for that, because whether or not you're on the council, if you're on the zoning board of appeals, you're still under the provisions of FOIA and Open Meetings Act. So I think it's important to have people who may not be on the more public boards be aware of their need to understand the laws that we have to follow too. So I think that there might be a good rationale for at least making provisions for, like I said, the training for council, and then really what should be, I feel, annual trainings for all the board members, because different appointments, different changes, and they have different membership. So
Okay.
So I'm fine with that. I'm just
Okay.
Yeah.
And like I said, if you see things here you think should be lowered, this is the time to speak now, and we'll do it. But and two, don't forget, in 19, as we see things are, if we're not using as much or using more, whatever, we do have the opportunity to amend them in 19 as well. Flipping the page to city managers, this is where you'll see up in the salary and wages a big spike. Bear in mind, this is not only the city manager's salary. This, as in the past, is also the assistant, or at one time we had an administrative assistant to the city manager, and then for a short period of time we had the assistant city manager. Those have always been in there, so you can see you had two positions in there, key positions, and you can see how much of their salaries were spread throughout the city, because obviously it was much less than what we're looking at this year.
Go, Councilor French.
Do we hope to have a second position in the city manager in the coming year?
Yes, the first assistant city manager's already been posted.
Fantastic.
Yep. And it is budgeted in. Other than that, everything's pretty much the same on city manager. We flip to the assessing. With our new assessing firm, we actually had a slight decrease in what they're charging us, so that actually went down a little bit. Not anything significant, but other than that, no big changes in assessing. Flip the page to the next one, city attorney. Unless there's questions, and again, feel free to stop me if there are. The city attorney, we did have a very slight increase that the council approved. That is reflected, I think, going from 87.5 to the 90,000. Other than that, nothing real big. With our city retainer, we have had some more expenses in 18 from actually a couple labor attorney, and I think we also use a attorney for, seems like there was someone else.
Environmental, there
you go, thank you.
Okay.
We don't anticipate as much next year, but who knows, that's kind of stuff hard to anticipate. Flipping over, city clerk. Actually, this year was an election year, but even so, wasn't too terribly bad. Next year, we do have a lot less budgeted in the election expense. But on the flip side of that, there are some increases in just, general increases from other expenses, but nothing real significant. Actually, overall, expenditures are down slightly from each year.
Thank you, Joe.
Flipping over, the next is human resources. This one, at first glance, you look at that and you think, okay, salary and wage, why is it going down? Well, again, part of the city manager's wages in the past were spread to this department. Those have come out because they are now all going to the city manager's department. And the HR position is technically a part-time position because it's split with, it's a full-time person, but she splits her duties between HR and public safety.
Okay, so that was my next question.
Yep.
Okay.
This is only reflects a small, I can't remember the hours, the split, but this is only partial for her. Flipping over to finance, you're going to see the same type of thing, salary and wage, a pretty big jump. And again, that was primarily due to a couple things. Right or wrong on the reasoning, in the 18 years I've been in finance, we've done a lot of juggling around with positions on who does what duties does each position handle. And at one point in time, it was set up where the sewer and water billing person was always paid 100% by sewer and water. 50-50. Even though they resided in the finance department, sewer and water are paid. So it's kind of the opposite thing happening. And we thought, again, that doesn't really make sense. They're in our department. Let's pay for them out of our department. We will charge sewer and water for doing that service. So a lot of that is that sewer and water position, or billing person's position, is now reflected in finance instead of over in sewer and water. Other than that, I don't believe there's any big changes in finance that I can see. Flipping to municipal building. We did bump up this year. We had the new boiler, which, by the way, I don't recall seeing the invoice for it yet, which surprises me, but at any rate, we bumped up about halfway down building and grounds repair. We jumped it up to $74,000, which should be plenty to cover because I think the boiler was like 58, somewhere around there, and then there was some more for asbestos removal, and we weren't sure at the time we put this together if they run into problems and have to do more extensive. Actually, they did discover a pump that's bad, and they did suggest we replace that as well. I have not seen the quote on that. I'm sure it'll probably be covered with what we already have budgeted. Obviously, we don't expect, or fingers crossed, we don't hope that we have anything major like that for next year. So we're not looking at any kind of expenses anywhere near that much next year. So flipping over to the next page, cemetery. One big change here, 3 lines down, 101-276-699. We have always transferred in money from the cemetery trust to help cover the care or the ongoing, the mowing and all the maintenance, I guess, that takes place out at the cemetery. Our acting DPW director did some digging on that and brought it to our attention. Little did we know, but brought it to our attention. He found something in our charter or ordinance somewhere. He found where technically the only money that we really should have been using from cemetery trust is your earnings, your investment or interest earnings. We should not really have been drawing principal. And the other thing that happened is years ago, if people remember, when the cemetery lots were sold, we always collected a portion to put into the cemetery trust to build that. That practice stopped quite a long time ago. I'm not really sure why we stopped it. But between the two, since we no longer were collecting money to put in there, and because we were transferring out larger amounts and dipping into the principal sum, we decided, well, this isn't right. We got to build this back up. So effective immediately, starting in 19, discontinued all the transfers from Cemetery Trust, and we'll be looking at ways to try to get that built back up to where it should be. So that revenue has come out of cemetery. But everything else, I think, is pretty much the same in Cemetery Trust.
Yes, City Manager.
I also want to mention the one other thing that's not kind of later talks about in the budget where it says about the $3,000 that we transfer from St. John for taking care of their portion of the cemetery. We've talked about this in a staff meeting, and I think it's 5% of what we it's 5% of the property belongs to them. So I do believe that we need to have further discussion with them to ensure that that 5% is actually covered. I'm not sure where the $3,000 comes from. We'll be looking for that contract if there is one. I know I have not seen it as of yet. And it's just to assist us in covering the cost that the city entails. Is not trying to we're not trying to make any money. We're just trying to cover our own costs. So if they own 5% of the cemetery and we take care of it, then they should pay 5% of that budget. It's about $8,000 a year. I know what it is. But I wanted to make that clear because that is something that definitely needs to be addressed. It hasn't been addressed, and I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar that that's something that we definitely need to.
Totally honest, in that staff meeting when we talked about it, everybody kind of like, where does 3,000 come from? Everybody's kind of like, well, it's always been that way. You know, I don't know when it was raised last. I can't recall. It's been a long time, and obviously the cost to take care to maintain things has gone up. I mean, the cost of everything's gone up. You know, the cost of equipment, cost of labor, cost of your gas and oil and parts, and everything's gone up, and we've never entertained the idea of raising that. So it's probably time to have that discussion.
Just a quick question. So I'm assuming again, like when we talk about salary or wages, that's dealing with the one person who's out there.
The DPW guys, we had to do them a little bit different because they do frequently work in a lot of different departments. So they are, we're trying to do it based on historical data as to how much time, like for example, what you might find in the cemetery, you have certain times of year, like right before Memorial Day, for example, where it's all hands on deck. Everybody comes down and they all work. So we try to, and they're going to charge their time to the cemetery. So if we just looked at that one person who is our primary person out there, the sexton, it's not going to cover, it's not going to be enough budgeted for that because there are going to be others that will come in and help him. So we are trying, and through the DPW, because they do help each other out so much, we are trying to go by historical information to see how much extra we need.
Okay.
I kind of remember, just a side note, back when I first got involved in trying to learn how to do the budgeting, and Mr. Kevin Markovich was here, who had been here for years and years and years. He would kind of tell us, like, you know, it wasn't in a person. He'd say, like, 1.5 bodies out there, or 2.5. You know, he'd kind of tell you about how many is going to average throughout the year, and that's kind of what this is. You got one person that's there all the time, but you're probably going to have some others that come out there periodically. So nothing else on the cemetery. Flipping down, public safety. Of course, that's our biggest item. I know Chief Kip likes to look at it like, yeah, but that's two, he keeps saying, because that's fire and police. He likes to make that clear that this is two instead of one. Helps justify the cost a little bit, I guess. And it's true, our officers are doubled up doing both fire and police. And honestly, I don't believe there are any real big changes in public safety that I'm aware of. I think we had some patrol car grants that came in that we had not budgeted yet for. I don't know if he's acquired any for 19, but other than that, everything I think looks pretty much the same, with one exception. We have under our new leader who is keeping us in line. She has instructed him to pay close attention to overtime. So that has been reduced significantly. We'll see how it goes. And again, like we said, things come up. Sometimes things happen. If something does happen, we may have to do amendments, but.
Manager and then Councilmember French.
We have talked about that, and that number may change to ensure training. The public safety officers, the city does pay for their training, but they also get paid overtime for training because they come in when they're off for training. So that may change, but that is one of the reasons why that number may change for training purposes. But I have and did ask for all of the department to see where we can reduce. I cannot support a budget if we cannot find out areas where we can reduce, but also still give staff raises. And then we had to think about additional revenues that the city is going to need. So those are also items that we were needing to address in our staff meetings.
Councilmember French.
Thank you. Right below that section on overtime, there's a new contribution, employer contribution to the ADPS pension for the 19 of 1675, which has been zero for as long as I remember. You know what that is?
Yes, I do. In the command officer's contract, when the union contracts were last negotiated, it was agreed upon for the command officers that the city would start contributing I think it's a let me think about this. It's a 0.25% the first year and half the second, or half the first year and 1 the second year. It got in the 3-year contract. It was 0 the first year, then it went to half, then it went to 1.
So it's not in response to not having sufficient funds. It's just maintain the funding levels.
Absolutely. I mean, like we talked the other day when we looked at the public safety pension fund, they're probably one of the best in the state.
Yeah, that's what I remember hearing. So that was
okay.
So, good catch. But yeah, that's what that is. Just simply a contract negotiated item.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I'm not aware of much else in public safety that's changed a great deal. And if you flip over to the next page, you can see obviously their total expenditures are about the same. So, again, not much else has changed other than, we took out some overtime, but again, when you have that big a staff, and if, based on union contracts, or if it gets a 2% raise or whatever, I won't say it washes, but it comes out close. So, flipping over to 442, code enforcement. Thing I might point out above, the very first line item, cornerstone permits. Those are, it really doesn't matter what that number is. That's a money in, money out. The permit money, people come here when they want permits from Cornerstone, they pay us. Whatever that amount is, we then get invoiced from Cornerstone and it goes right back out. So lower down, you'll see where that money goes right back out. So could be, if it's 70,000, if it's 100,000, doesn't matter. It's a money in, money out. Doesn't affect our bottom line. Nothing much has changed other than, again, in salary and wages. Code enforcement was one position that was spread out among some other funds in the past. That is all now in the code enforcement fund. So obviously salary and wages are up. Other than that, I'm not seeing much here that's different from prior years. And know we're going through it kind of quick, but again, I know there's a lot to cover tonight on the agenda as well besides this. So, I'm actually going to flip 2 pages to get over into Department 442, City Maintenance. Again, that's primarily just the maintenance of City Hall and some of the buildings the city owns. No big anticipated changes there. I know we need a lot. It'd be nice to put a lot in there, but the budget just doesn't allow for it, so no big changes there. Flipping over to 444, tree trimmings. This is one where we get bless you. We get criticized every year because the DPW director always wants it a lot higher because they get a lot of calls from people around the city who are complaining about trees that are dead, limbs are falling, and all that kind of stuff. It just, again, the budget is tight to where, we do the best we can do.
So to what extent is that coming out of, and the solid waste fund
Yep.
has steadily kind of decreased, but is there a preference between the general fund department for this and then the separate solid waste fund in terms of dealing with those trees? I know a number of residents have mentioned that to me about. So are we doing it more out of solid waste, or are we doing it?
Generally, what we have done on the budget is whatever's reflected here is 1/2 of the total. We have another equivalent amount in solid waste, and the theory behind it, and again, I'm not an expert on that part of the law, but my understanding is when the tree is standing and they have to cut it to fall the tree, that has to come out of general fund. Once the stuff is on the ground, the cost to haul it away and dispose of it can be charged as solid waste.
Okay.
So it's just kind of, whether 50/50 is a totally accurate number, I don't know, but I think it comes out pretty close.
Okay.
Other questions on that one? Flipping over to engineering. This is just a general engineering. Most of our engineering costs throughout the city are tied to specific projects, whether it be a grant project, street projects, whatever. However, there are times when we have the need to have a budget set up just in case we do some, I think, like, for example, the Ash Street parking lot had some engineering costs. I don't know, there was some other question.
Councilman French?
Thank you. So we don't have a professional engineer on staff, do we?
No.
So then this would be a contractual service line item.
Yep. Okay. Now, again, a little bit of, and I guess whether this is right or wrong, I don't know. Again, we're making steps on trying to clean up the budget some. One little area you will notice on salary and wage, the DPW, because they generally are involved in overseeing any projects, we do have a little bit, just like the DPW staff who work on several different departments, a little bit of their salary is tied to this.
Okay.
So, and again, that's something that maybe going forward we may address that as well.
I don't know, probably
handle that.
management.
Flipping over, street lighting. This is the one, if you'll recall, that because it's such a large number, and one time looking through the state's uniform chart of accounts, I happened to notice that they have a specific line item for street lighting, a specific department for it, and because it's so large, because in the past it was lumped in with city, I think it was city maintenance or something, and I thought, it probably would be nice to break this out. It's shocking to see what it costs the city to light up the streets. The good news, first the bad news. I don't know why, but we're seeing our energy costs go up quite a bit in 2018. I think it's going to be quite a bit more than what we budgeted. That's why in our proposed, we bumped it up to $169.5. The good news, as I think we mentioned before, We have a partner, organization in town that's willing to partner with us. They kind of wanted to stay anonymous, but they are looking at helping us finance the replacement of a lot of the street lights to go to a more efficient street light. We started that process. We've been working with consumers, been working with, well, consumers, of course, has a couple different divisions to get involved in this, and I think we're getting pretty close. It didn't help when we had some turnover and staff and stuff that had been involved in it, but and consumers, when they pass it from one department to the other, it seems to always be a little bit of a lag, and it takes a little bit of time to get them back on track again. But I think we're getting pretty close. They've identified the lights going through town, looking at the ones that draw the most wattage, and trying to identify which ones we can replace. So I think that we will see that happen. I got my fingers crossed it'll happen not too late in 19, hoping, and if that does, we should see a reduction or savings.
So, 1 second. So I know at one point there was an effort to kind of document which lights were ours and which ones were consumers, and I can't remember was that ever
It
completed?
was. I remember seeing the blueprints on Director Jim Leonardson's desk down there. We were going over them and kind of color coding them, and which ones were the real expensive ones, which ones were mediocre, and et cetera, and which ones were already been replaced. And it did identify those. I don't have the knowledge myself to know the numbers of what the city owns versus what the consumers owns, and it would take me a little bit of digging to find those blueprints. But I know they're out somewhere readily accessible down there, probably in his office, because we were looking at them not too long ago.
Okay. Councilmember French.
I remember Mayor and Councilman Reed, we had a conversation a number of years ago about the fact that our electrical bill our lights are not metered, and so that the electrical bill we get is sort of a contract, but not really a contract. So I'm wondering if these efforts, which I applaud, get us to LED, downward focusing, reduce light pollution up above and all that, that's great. But if consumers isn't willing to sort of create the audit or a monitoring system on our actual electric usage, and I'm not sure. I know when we were doing LEDs downtown, that was the argument that we were hoping we'd save some money, and then we didn't save any money because it turns out they're not metered, and so I'm wondering if we...
Well, my understanding, I've had some involvement and sat in on some of those meetings when we met with the consumers representatives, and my understanding is it's not really a flat contract amount. They have a formula based on, again, they know what types of lights they are, what wattages they draw, and then they look at the daylight hours, and there is actually a formula that they will fluctuate each month quite a bit.
Right.
And again, I think it's based on their calculation of daylight hours versus, what types of lights draw. Some draw a lot more wattage than others, and so there is I don't know if they're going back and analyzing it, like as one breaks and they come out and replace it over time. I don't know how frequently they're updating their formula, but there's a little bit of a calculation that goes into it. It's not totally a flat rate, but yeah. And with us working with them and saying, look, these are all new and these are all energy efficient, I would suspect we'll see some savings, because if we don't, we certainly will have some conversations with them.
Okay. Thank you.
Flipping over, EPA landfill. If you're familiar, again, the EPA monitors the landfill out there, and the quirky thing about this one is about every 5th year they have to do more than just monitor. I think, if I recall, they're actually replacing the monitors or something along that lines, and the fee is quite a bit more on that 5th year. They have given us a schedule for 15, 20 years out, so we kind of know when that's going to hit. Unfortunately, 19 is the year that it hits, so that's why that's up. Flipping over to the next page, the river trail. nothing planned in 19, maybe, sort of. I think there might be some plan taking place in 19, but I think a lot of the city's match will probably cover, will come from our non-motorized money that we need to spend in street department. We are required by, when we get our Act 51 money, we are required to spend a certain amount for non-motorized. We'll hear more about that tomorrow night when we do the street department budget. But it is possible we may have something in here, but the time we put this together, nothing was concrete as far as what grant amount we might receive, what our match might be, et cetera. So at the time, there's nothing for 19. We may need to amend that as we learn more. Parks, again, no big change there. Everything pretty much is the same, I think, as what we've done in the past. Flip them over. We did have, on the next page, Rieger Park Pond project. There was some work we wanted to do in 18, had hoped to do. I think Director Leonardson had an estimate of around 17,000. Unfortunately, with a lot of things going on, that's something that we didn't get to. We talked about, should we do it in 19? And I don't know. I think the consensus was, let's wait. It sounds like there may be some other issues that if we fix the one thing, it still may not be a total fix. It might be more of a Band-Aid type thing. So it's kind of been put on hold.
This was a request from Councilmember Spicer regarding the pond, yeah.
And I'm trying to remember what Director Leonardson said. I think it had something to do with a broken valve, and they weren't sure if it was repaired or whether it would give us the desired, whether it'd be a fix or not a fix. It was kind of a, let's start here. And
Is it possible to take a look at what we could, I don't really recall where the conversation ended with that. Who's going to look at it?
I don't remember either, but yeah, we can look to see if we can find something on that.
Okay.
I don't remember.
So eyesore.
Right.
I don't know, but I'm like, wow.
I'll make a note. Got it written down. All right, flipping to Holland Park. Councilmember Reed, that's of course her baby. So at this point in time, I'm not aware of anything that she had going particularly. We just try to put some number, generally if she gets a grant, it's for a specific purpose, and the money then is used for that purpose. And the bottom line generally is a wash. I just threw 10,000 in there, not knowing whether she had anything lined up yet or not. But again, if more comes in, we'll mend it. If less comes in, same type of deal. But the bottom line is, it's usually money in, money out. It doesn't affect the bottom line of the budget. Question.
Can I go back to just, possible
Councilmember
that-
Spicer.
Oh, thank you, Mayor, I'm sorry. Yeah, there might be a grant available for the Rieger Park repair annually.
Possibly. Yeah, I'm not familiar with what types of. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, John.
No problem. All right. General Appropriations, Department 895. This is kind of the catch-all for anything that doesn't really fit anywhere else in the general fund. And what we have done with it primarily over the years as technology has grown is we've decided that maybe that's the best place to charge all of our annual maintenance fees on IT, the security, for the server, the contracts we have with all our software providers, all these different things. I mean, every department, every fund in the city uses the software. to try to spread it out to all of them, you know, it's tough to do, so we kind of use this general appropriation department as a catch-all for all those miscellaneous types of costs. I think we also have in there some of our miscellaneous paper, postage, some of that kind of stuff that was used citywide, but again, it kind of gives a breakdown of where a lot of the money's going, but nothing has changed much from prior years. So, well, one exception, I guess, again, the I don't know, just underneath that gray bar, something we need to address. Again, when the MERS defined benefit plan was in place and going way back, we had the I'm sorry, not dispatchers, the nurses from the hospital. The city is still being stuck with that liability. They are telling us, they do this actuarial every year, telling us based on that actuarial what the city should be contributing. I'm not exactly sure why the nurses one is jumping so much more than the others, unless it could possibly be, if you think about it, the nurses, the hospital's been gone for a long time, so no new employees have gone into that program, that plan for a long time, so no contributions are being made, and over time, those that were vested in it and deferred are now approaching retirement age and are starting to draw. So that's probably what is happening, but we have ongoing conversations with MERS all the time. So this is always a tough one for me to swallow when I see it jump so much, and again, I've already asked them, hey, you got to come explain this again. They're out here every year trying to explain this stuff to me, so yeah.
No, that was just because I know there was something with the actuarial,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
so, yeah.
Yep, and they break it down, like I said, we had the nurses division, the dispatch division, the Albion housing division is in there. Of course, they pay us for that, and we just forward that money on. And then there is a DPW division and one for the admin staff, I think, back when it was offered to them. And the other ones are increasing, but not this much. This nurses one really jumped, and we're trying to figure out why is that one jumping so much more than the others. So hopefully we'll get some more answers on that. Flipping the page.
Before you do that.
Oh, Councilman French.
Oh, yep.
We had talked briefly about software to help connect our property and income tax stuff. Is that going to be in this part, or is that going to be in your division of finance, or where's that going to be? Because if we're going to be paying for our new software or what have you,
I guess
IT services, or that going to finance?
Well, let me back up a little bit. So the income tax software, if that's what you're referring to, yep. So that is a totally separate software with a separate company. So it's not, it does not interface that well with BSNA. All our other modules or all our other tools, for the most part, that are BSNA
Based.
Where BSNA was the vendor, they all interface.
Right.
So,
City Manager.
I also wanted to mention, also Councilman French, that speaking of the BSNA software, we're looking into it also being in the building department as well, so that we can connect the departments together. What happens in Albion when people buy and sell property in town, there's no easy way to check monies owed to the city.
Right.
So we're trying to link all of the softwares together, as well as what's in public safety, so we can ensure that the city is getting all the monies that's owed. So that is also something we're looking into. It's not completely reflected in this budget because we don't have all the actual numbers, but just for training and software was over $20,000.
Yeah. I was just expecting, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just expecting if we were going in that route, I was asking whether or not it would reflect in the general appropriation, or would it be at the division level? So we might see once we get to next month and we get down to the nitty-gritty that number of 49.5 is going to go up.
We haven't
Possibly.
gotten all the actual, I apologize.
Go ahead, no.
We haven't gotten all the actual numbers yet for the rest of the BSNA software, but I will definitely ensure that I keep the new council abreast of that and make sure everyone knows exactly what's going on in regards to those numbers.
Yeah.
And my thinking about that a little bit, I'm thinking we are so close to the end of the year right now that my guess is even if we got a hold of BSNA tomorrow and said, hey, we want to do this or that, I mean, there's a time frame, you know, for them to get it scheduled, to get out here and to do all the preliminary, the background, looking at your data and all that. So my guess is this would, even if we got a hold on tomorrow, it would not happen until sometime into 19. If that were the case, we'd probably approach it with an amendment or something and say.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Flipping now to the final page, I guess, page everybody always likes to see. So where we're at, if you recall, I'm going to go back to 18 for a minute. In 18, we come up with original budget that was $172,000, where expenditures exceeded revenues of $172,000. It was agreed upon or approved that would come out of fund balance, because if you will recall, the state's definition of a balanced budget is having enough revenue or fund balance to cover your appropriations. And at the time, I think we looked at that, it was like a 31 per, even if we'd hit the 172,000 shortfall, we would have been about 31.25%. Our fund balance would be about 31.25%. I know when you look at where it's tough to to explain that projected number. We're showing 175.9, which is more. But that, again, we're trying to be very conservative and making sure we got everything accounted for, because if we're off, the auditors are going to write it up. We always come in much better than that number is reflected. Because if you think about it, if you're budgeting a little higher or looking at trying to give yourself a cushion on 20-some departments and you don't hit that, when you get to the bottom line, that number usually is a pretty good reduction of what you've estimated. But again, you kind of have to do it because the auditors look at this on a departmental basis. So if we're short in any department, they're going to write us up. So again, I do not anticipate us being 175,000 short this year. Well, we never hit that number unless something crazy happens between now and the end of the year. I think it'll come in significantly better than that. Having said that, for 2019, taking these initial steps to try to change how we're doing the budget, we're down to a shortfall of where appropriations exceed revenue of $81,000. And again, that would be covered with fund balance, and we would still have a fund balance of 27.76%. The state recommends or likes you to see 15%. And again, if we come in better this year, it's even going to, it's not even going to be that bad. So, we're still probably going to be 29, 30%, somewhere in that ballpark is my guess. The other thing I might add is, I think you've heard City Manager Rufus mention everybody trying to take a look, all the staff members trying to take a look at where can we generate more revenues. And I think we're going to be bringing some of those ideas, looking at our fees. None of that is in here. We have not bumped up the costs or the revenues or the anticipated revenues anywhere in here in 19 to help cover that. So we're hoping that as we start finding places where we can come up with some more revenues and more, from fees or whatnot, that number will be even better.
Councilmember French.
Thank you. In reflecting on in this past year, I can think of a couple of expenses that we approved, including a new pump for our wells, which I think was close to $70,000, as Mr. Levinson reported to us, and there was at least one other in the 25 to 30,000. So I'm not surprised by that. You know, if we'd be 100,000 in the hole, because both of those things that came to us were unexpected, right? The pump breaks, the boiler in the city hall breaks.
The Ash Street project.
That's right, the Ash Street project. All of these things were unexpected, and so that's what the fund balance is for, is for those emergencies that happen and we have to. So I don't think we need to be beating you guys up.
Well, some of the pumps and stuff were sewer, and well, mainly sewer, some overages in some different areas, mostly sewer, which we'll get to that tomorrow. We are trying to get some reimbursements on that. But in regards to this one, like I said, number one, having that reimbursement from the state, the local community stabilization reimbursement dropped $50,000. That hurt. I mean, we take $50,000 out of your general fund. That hurts. Then we did the boiler. That was roughly $60,000. That Ash Street.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where some of them are coming. So.
Thanks for your hard work.
Is there any further discussion or questions from council? Thank you, Director Mead, staff, and manager. Okay. Future agenda items. Any future agenda items? Councilman.
At the last meeting, I asked for more information regarding the recreational fund, so just want to make sure we remember that.
Okay. Okay, so no future agenda items. Motion to excuse absent council members. Did he? Oh, okay. Okay.
Been on quite a while.
Okay. Is there a motion to? So moved. Is there moved and supported? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Okay. We've excused Councilmember Barnes. Public comments. Persons addressing the City Council. Huh? Oh, yes. I'm sorry. And Councilmember Lawler. There was a health concern there. Public comment. Persons addressing the City Council. We ask that you limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes. We ask that you observe proper decorum. Please state your name and address. Are there any public comments this evening?
Hi, guys. My name's Todd Clark. I live at 27484 160 East in Homer. You guys don't know me because I've never been before a board in my life. I have no idea how this process works. It's been pretty entertaining, actually. The reason why I'm here is because I understand you guys are going to push through this rental registration. And I just wanted to make a final plea with you guys to reconsider that debacle before it gets off the ground. I'm an investor. I'm a real estate investor. I do that to make money. That's why I do it. I've chosen Albion over the last several years to invest in because it was friendly. It was friendly to investors. The money worked. I was able to purchase the properties and put some equity in them, and it worked. And because it worked, I've put $500,000 into Albion. My brothers have put another $500,000 into Albion because it was friendly to investors. The properties that I own are beautiful. The people that live there are very happy. I have no turnover. I've never had a rental sit empty for 2 weeks ever because they're nice. If this goes through, I'll sell the rentals and I'll never invest in this town again. And there will be many people like me that will not invest in Albion any longer because this is nothing less than an attack on the investors that are trying to work with the city. The compliance of this code is going to be severely burdensome. It won't affect me. I'll do very well whether this goes through or not because I'll sell the properties that I have and I'll double the money that I have in them. And I'll reinvest in another community that's friendly. I have properties in Marshall, I have properties in Homer, properties in Colon, and I don't have any problems in any of those communities. I've never been attacked like this before. And I can tell you that the reason, I can say, you won't have to read very far in this to find out that it's an attack on investors. It's thinly veiled as an effort to make a safe place for the residents, but it really isn't. If you just go to the second page, it says a license for a rental structure cannot be transferred to another rental structure. That makes perfect sense. Or a succeeding owner. That makes no sense. If I paid for a rental inspection and I complied and I had my property certified and decided to sell my rental unit 3 months later, and I advertised it as a rental unit for sale in Albion and it's rental certified, it would make no difference to the new owner because that new owner would now have to have his property recertified again, pay all the expenses to have that done, when the property was just done 3 months earlier. There's no benefit to the community for that. That house was already certified. It's simply a way to get in the pockets of the investors and the people in town to help alleviate some budget issues. There are very many flaws in this, and if somebody would take the time to sit down and talk to me about it, I could point out in at least a half a dozen ways why this isn't going to work. My time is up.
Yep. Thank you. Is there any further comment?
Brian Mull, 4772 J Drive South, Homer, Michigan. As I sat through the meeting, I observed what you were willing to do for American Colloid for 11 jobs, tax abatements and other things, which I commend. That's good. Keep the jobs here. I don't think you have any idea of the ramifications this will have on the rental market. As with Mr. Clark, we have multiple properties that we've upgraded, have good tenants. Another thing that he said in the rental ordinance, if you look, is that one tenant moves out, it has to be recertified for the next tenant. I might have, if I had a couple bad tenants, which sometimes happens, we miss the mark, we might have to have that certified 6 times in a year. I mean, that seems absurd to say the least. We have a property in Jackson, and the climate over there with rental certification and inspections is very hostile, has been for some time, and has driven the rents up dramatically. For example, 5 years ago, a one-bedroom was $400, now it's $5, and a big part of that is because of the demand. The city of Jackson has made it very clear to people that they're not landlord-friendly. They want owner-occupied, and they've done a fine job of moving people out. I will not invest there. We bought one, no more. We have other people in the landlord association that feel the same way. They've sold their properties. And then you have an exodus of people, and sometimes the property values drop at that point and you don't achieve your goal. The other question I have is, if this is about safety, then why not every property? Why would you not care as much about the owner-occupied as you do the tenants? It seems to be a double standard. So I think that, and the last thing I want to say is that we did meet with the landlord subcommittee, or the rental certification subcommittee, and tried to work harmoniously with the landlord association, which I'm a member of. And they were supposed to get us goals and objectives. The follow-up meeting where those were supposed to be presented was canceled. I believe you were supposed to be there, Mr. Brown. And we never got any clear goals and objectives to what you want to accomplish. We're not against making Albion a better, safer place and a nicer town. I mean, I think all landlords would like that. It brings up our property values. And, but to punish everyone in one group, one large group, I think is not a wise decision. There are other alternatives out there, I believe, that would serve everyone better. Again, I'm not opposed to working with the city. We'd like to. I mean, I think some of our objectives are identical, but I think it needs to be a collaboration, not very one-sided. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You can start it over. Start it over.
Thank you.
Okay, Terry Adkins, 1807227 Mile Road. I'm also a member of the Landlords Committee. I met with the subcommittee. We thought we had a pretty good relationship. We thought we had a pretty good idea of what the city wanted and what we wanted. But this proposal is totally different than what we talked about. And just the $65 that you're talking about for the registration will cost me maybe $1,300 a year just to register to say, hey, I'm a landlord here. It's absolutely ridiculous because you send me the water bills, you send me the tax bills, you know who I am, you know where I live. Why should I have to pay that kind of money just to say that I'm a landlord in this town? And what they said about the increases, I had a house in Jackson also. I sold it because of just the increased cost and just the stupidity of the rules that they want. They want a switch inside the basement door to shut the furnace off so the firemen would be safe. And the firemen say, we don't go in and shut, we pull a meter. So that's the kind of thing that just goes on. Each inspector is different. You'll find a different thing. If you do it 3 times a year, he's going to find 3 different things because that's what inspectors get paid for. So I think if you're willing to work with us, we're willing to do something to try to keep the property values up because that benefits us. But if you don't, it's going to go downhill because we're all going to sell. That's to somebody. Thank you.
Is there any further public comment this evening?
Hello, Cheryl Mall, 24772 J Drive South in Homer. We've run the numbers on what we estimate this is going to cost our tenants because as business people, we collect the fees and pass them on. We feel that this would probably average about $25 a month for each unit, for each single family dwelling, based on the $65 fee. Then there's an inspection fee. Our time and money, we cannot send an inspector to the property without one of us stopping whatever we're doing to going as well. So there are a lot of fees that although we don't pay them to the city, they are costs that are incurred, and the tenants do have to cover that. Another thing that's really disconcerting to us is the number of dollars that would be leaving the community. Because if we have all these fees that go to an outside sourcing company that comes in and does the inspection, let's say Cornerstone, all this money is going to be leaving our community of Albion and going to Athens and going to other places. And we are of the opinion that every dollar that we can keep in Albion makes Albion stronger. And that is not what we want to do, is to collect all this money for Cornerstone and charge it to our tenants. That is not at all what we want to do. We want to keep the housing in Albion nice. We want to have lovely places for our tenants to live, and we want people to stay here and love Albion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment this evening? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to city manager report. Do you have anything to? Okay. Yes. Mayor or council member comments? Any comments from council this evening? Okay. So one of the things, I hear the concerns that were raised by the landlords. The council did approve a subcommittee to do that. I know there's been some discussions, and that needs to ultimately come back to council with a recommendation from that subcommittee. I suspect that the concern is coming from some information that was shared from the manager to myself as mayor and then to the subcommittee that wasn't, obviously it wasn't put on the agenda, it wasn't acted on. The concern there is who shared that. And there's only 4 people that was shared with on the council, And I know I didn't send it out and distribute it. And I know the other council members who are not on the subcommittee, so it leaves the 3 persons on the subcommittee. And that's really just inappropriate because it puts the manager in a position where she's unable to share information and have the council come and have those deliberations. So really that's not really, it doesn't help the process because it's still going to have to come back to council. The subcommittee is still going to have to do their work. Their mandate is still in place. And so it's similar to, I serve on the EDC, and I can't go into all of that, but the EDC is working with partners to really, hopefully in the next year, make some outstanding changes in the economy to our city. But if I were to go out and disclose the nature of that, that'd be really inappropriate, be detrimental to the work of the city. So I think that that's something that hasn't even been discussed by the subcommittee, what the manager shared. So like I said, I don't see how that's helpful in this situation, but Councilmember Reed.
Since the last meeting was canceled, when are we going to get together again to decide what we need to do?
To clarify, there was a statement made. I would never show up to one of the subcommittees because there'd be a quorum, and plus I'm not on that committee, so that's really up to the subcommittee to decide, working with the staff. I believe Director Tracy was working and the manager. So that's something that the subcommittee has to decide what to do. Councilmember Spicer.
Thank you, Mayor. Myself, Councilwoman Reed, and Lawler, as well as Mr. Tracy, were part of the subcommittee. So I think we had a meeting scheduled some time ago, and it was canceled. Canceled for whatever reason, I'm not sure. So I think we should get together, Mr. Tracy, Director Tracy, and Ms. Reed and Ms. Lawler, and decide on a definite date that we can meet so we can get this thing moving forward.
Yeah.
At least and get it to council and make a decision. Thank you.
Yeah. But I think one of the things that maybe this council will do, maybe the next council will do, there probably needs to be some procedure for appropriate communications and between council members, between subcommittees, between elected officials and administration, between city officials and administrators and other bodies of the city, because it's really important that everyone is on the same page and that we don't have people not communicating appropriately. One of the things that I always, I'll say this and stop, I always gave my predecessor, Mayor Domingo, respect, and as a council member, if there's something I wanted to put on the agenda or discuss, I always included the mayor, the manager, and the attorney. And I know that Attorney Harkness could attest to that. Really trying to make sure that there was information about what's going on, because so that everyone can appropriately do their part and play their role. So with no further comment, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.